The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge, Wyoming territory, where gossip traveled faster than any telegraph wire ever could. It was the spring of 1876, and the small frontier town was about to witness something that would keep tongues wagging for years to come. Inside the Silver Dollar Saloon, a group of cowboys huddled around their whiskey glasses, laughter echoing off the weathered wooden walls. Jake Morrison, the town's loudest storyteller, slammed his glass down with a grin. "You boys ain't gonna believe what I just heard," he said, eyes sparkling. "That wild man from the mountains, Elias Boon, the one they call Grizzly, he's gone and asked Clara Wade to marry him." The saloon erupted in disbelief. "Clara Wade?" Tom Henderson nearly choked on his drink. "That old spinster? The one looks like she's been chewing sour lemons her whole life?" "The very same," Jake confirmed, proud of his scoop. "Saw it myself. He walked right into her dress shop yesterday, stayed maybe 10 minutes, and came out with her saying, yes, quote. The laughter rolled through the saloon, drawing more men to the table. Even the bartender, old Sam Green, shook his head. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "Guess even a grizzly gets lonely enough to marry plain." "More like desperate," said Bill Cooper, the banker, joining in. "He's been up in them hills too long. Probably forgot what women look like." By noon, the news had spread through every corner of Cedar Ridge. At Murphy's General Store, Mrs. Elizabeth Murphy stood at the center of a circle of bonneted women, her voice full of mock sympathy. "Poor, poor Clara," she sighed dramatically, though her eyes danced with excitement. 32 years old and so desperate she'll marry a savage. "He probably threatened her," Mrs. Patterson suggested, hand to her chest. "You know how those mountain men are, half bear, half brute." Mrs. Stanley leaned closer, whispering, "I heard he lives in a cave and eats raw meat." The women gasped, shuddering at the thought. None of them mentioned how Elias Boon had once saved the Garrett family from freezing 2 winters back, or how he'd tracked down horse thieves the sheriff couldn't catch. In Cedar Ridge, kindness faded fast, but gossip never died. At the barber shop, Frank Phillips held court while shaving a ranch hand. "I've seen prettier faces on wanted posters," he said. The barber, Pete Crawford, laughed. "Maybe Grizzly's eyesight's gone bad from all that mountain glare." Even the children joined in. Outside the schoolhouse, little Tommy Morrison led a chant. Grizzly and Clara sittin' in a tree, ugly as can be. Before Miss Sarah Coleman chased them inside, shaking her head. By sunset, everyone in town knew. Some said Elias had been drunk, others swore it was a bet. A few even claimed Clara had bewitched him with herbs or potions. The stories twisted and tangled until no one remembered the truth, just that it made for good talk. In the post office, Edgar Whitman told anyone who'd listen, "Mark my words, he just needs a woman to cook and clean. Ain't love, it's convenience." Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry, gave him a sharp look. She remembered the food baskets Clara had left for struggling families, the clothes she mended for free. But her quiet disapproval was lost in the noise of gossip. As night fell, laughter and mockery filled the saloons again. "To the happy couple!" someone shouted, raising a glass. "May their kids get his looks and her charm." The roar of laughter that followed echoed across Main Street, where Sheriff Dan Coleman sat on the jail porch, whittling a piece of wood. He shook his head slowly. He'd seen real cruelty in his life, but sometimes it came with a smile. Meanwhile, high above the town, Elias Boon stood on the ridge watching the last light fade. At 6'4", with broad shoulders and hands scarred from years of hard living, he looked like a man carved from the mountain itself. His dark hair, streaked with early gray, brushed the collar of his coat. A deep scar traced his jaw, earned in a fight with the grizzly that gave him his name. He'd lived alone up here for 15 years. The war had driven him west, chasing silence to bury the memories that still haunted him. His cabin was simple but strong, built with his own hands. Inside, books lined the shelves. Emerson, Shakespeare, the Bible. He'd learned to read during the war, taught by a chaplain who'd said, "There's more than one way to be a strong man, son." Elias had fought storms, hunger, and loneliness. But lately, the quiet had grown heavy. He thought of Clara Wade, the seamstress the town mocked, the woman with gentle hands and sharp eyes. He'd watched her help the sick, comfort the poor, stand up for those with no voice. Where others saw plainness, he saw something rare, strength wrapped in kindness. Down in Cedar Ridge, Clara Wade sat in her small room above the dress shop, the light of her sewing lamp soft on her face. 32 and long past the age anyone expected her to marry. Her reflection showed what people saw: a thin face, tired eyes behind wire glasses, hair the color of wheat straw. But she worked with quiet pride, her fingers skilled, her heart kind. 3 days ago, Elias Boon had walked into her shop and asked her to marry him. "I can't offer you luxury," he'd said simply, "but I can offer respect, a home, a man who'll see you for who you are." When she asked why, his answer had stayed with her ever since. "Because I've watched you. You help people who don't deserve it. You stand tall when others whisper. You've got strength, Miss Wade, the kind that lasts." She'd said yes that morning. And though she knew the whole town would laugh, she'd never felt more certain. For the first time in years, Clara Wade felt seen. As night fell, Elias looked up at the stars, the mountains silent around him. Tomorrow, the gossip would grow louder. But he didn't care. He'd faced grizzlies before. And he could face this, too. Because sometimes, the most beautiful things were the ones no one else could see. The next afternoon, the bell above Clara Wade's dress shop chimed as Elias Boon stepped through the doorway, ducking slightly to clear the frame. The golden light of late spring streamed through the windows, catching dust motes and the soft colors of folded fabrics. Clara looked up from her sewing table, scissors frozen in midair. "Mr. Boon," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I didn't expect you back so soon." Elias removed his hat and stood there, large and serious, yet somehow gentle. "Said I'd come for your answer. Been 3 days." Figured that was time enough for thinking. Clara set down her scissors and stepped around the table, her apron trembling just slightly against her hands. "Before I give it," she said carefully, "I need to know something. Why me? The truth, Mr. Boon, not kindness or pity. I've had enough of both to last me a lifetime." For a moment, Elias didn't answer. He turned toward the window, watching 2 women hurry past, whispering behind their hands. Then he looked back at her, and his eyes were steady and honest. "First time I saw you," he began, "was 2 winters back, that blizzard in January. Folks were running for shelter, not thinking of no one but themselves. You were out there in it helping old Martha Collins through the snow. You wrapped your own coat around her shoulders and near froze yourself. You didn't brag, didn't wait for thanks, you just did it." Clara remembered that storm. She'd almost lost her fingers to frostbite, but Martha had survived. "After that," Elias continued, "I kept watching, not stalking, just noticing. You nursed the Cherokee family's baby when no one else would. You stood up to Jake Morrison when he hit his horse. You give more to this town than it deserves. They call you plain, but I see more than faces. I see worth." Clara's breath hitched. "And that's why you want to marry me? Because I'm useful?" A small smile tugged at his lips. "No, ma'am. Because you've got the kind of beauty that lasts when everything else don't. I've been alone a long time. I don't need someone to decorate my cabin. I need someone to build a life with." She stared at him, her pulse hammering. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Elias said softly. "Enough to know you've been overlooked by fools who can't see past the surface. Enough to know you've got a heart like a sunrise after a hard winter." The shop went quiet, the air between them charged with something new, something fragile and real. Then Clara took a breath. "Yes," she said, surprising even herself. "Yes, Mr. Boon. I'll marry you." Elias nodded once, a slow, deliberate gesture that carried more weight than 1,000 words. 2 weeks, he said. "We'll marry proper before the judge. Gives you time to settle things here." 2 weeks? She repeated, startled. "Best not to give this town time to talk you out of it," he said simply. As if summoned by his words, the door burst open. The bell above it clanged violently, and in swept Mrs. Murphy, her face red with excitement and false concern. "Clara, dear!" she exclaimed. "I just heard the most ridiculous rumor." She stopped short when she saw Elias towering beside her friend. "Oh, Mr. Boon! I didn't realize you were here." "Ma'am," Elias said with polite coldness. Mrs. Murphy's eyes darted between them. "Clara, surely this talk of marriage is nonsense. You can't possibly mean to." "Whatever you have to say can be said in front of Mr. Boon," Clara interrupted, her voice stronger than she'd intended. "He's my intended." Mrs. Murphy blinked as if slapped. "My heavens! Clara Wade, are you out of your mind? That man lives like a beast. You'll be—" "Careful," Elias said quietly, his tone like distant thunder. Mrs. Murphy flushed, gathering her skirts. "I came here out of concern," she huffed. "But I see my advice isn't wanted." "No, ma'am," Clara said firmly. "It isn't." When the door closed behind her, Clara sagged slightly, the adrenaline leaving her body. "They'll come harder now," Elias warned. "Try to shame you, scare you. You'll have to be strong." "I've been small for a long time, Mr. Boon," she said softly. "Maybe it's time I stopped." He studied her, admiration flickering in his eyes. Then he reached into his coat and placed a small leather pouch on the table. "For your supplies, consider it a bride gift." "I can't take your money," she protested. "Yes, you can," he said simply. "We're partners now. Pride don't put food on the table." For a long moment, they just stood there. Then Elias nodded toward the door. "2 weeks, Clara Wade. Don't let them change your mind." When he was gone, the shop seemed to hum with silence. Clara held the pouch of coins, feeling their weight, and the weight of the decision she'd made. By morning, the first wave of concerned friends began to arrive. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Stanley, and Miss Hartwell came together, faces grave as undertakers. "Clara, dear," Mrs. Patterson began in her preacher's wife tone, "we've come to help you see reason. That man is not civilized." Clara folded fabric calmly. "He's never claimed to be." "You can't live like an animal in those mountains," Miss Hartwell sniffed. "No proper lady could." Clara set down her scissors. "Then it's a good thing I stopped trying to be what this town calls proper." The women gasped, scandalized, but Clara didn't flinch. Years of silent humiliation had hardened into quiet courage. That night, Elias returned to her shop with a bundle in his hands. "For you," he said, setting it down. Inside was a pair of fur-lined gloves, a wool cloak, and sturdy boots. "Mountain nights are cold." "They're beautiful," Clara whispered. He nodded once. 4 more days. Then we leave this town behind." As he turned to go, Clara touched the gloves again, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Safety. Outside, the gossip still burned through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. But inside that little dress shop, for the first time in her life, Clara Wade felt unafraid. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, frost tracing silver lace across Clara Wade's window. She'd been awake since before sunrise, her thoughts steady, her heart strangely calm. Today, her life would change forever. She dressed in the blue wool gown she'd sewn herself. Simple, practical, but touched with quiet beauty. White embroidery edged the cuffs and collar, and her mother's cameo brooch rested at her throat. When she pinned up her hair, she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The same features stared back, but there was something different now, a strength in her eyes, a light that hadn't been there before. Outside, the church bells rang across Cedar Ridge, calling the curious from every corner of town. Folks lined the dusty street, whispering behind gloved hands as Clara walked past. "Bless her heart, she's brave," said one. "Brave or foolish," muttered another. But Clara didn't look at them. She walked with her head high. The bouquet of dried wildflowers Elias had brought her clutched firmly in her hand. When she pushed open the church doors, the murmur of voices fell away. The building was full, every pew taken, every standing space crowded. The whole town had come to witness what they thought would be a spectacle. But as their eyes turned toward the front of the church, their laughter died in their throats, because the man waiting at the altar was not the wild, unkempt hermit they'd imagined. Elias Boon stood tall and sure, wearing a tailored black suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His dark hair was trimmed, his beard neatly shaped, his boots polished. He looked every bit a man of worth, his scar not frightening now but noble, like a mark of survival. A gasp rippled through the congregation. Even the women who'd mocked him for years found themselves staring in silent awe. But Elias saw only Clara. The moment she stepped through those doors, his face softened, his eyes filled with something deep and certain. When she reached him, he offered his hand, his voice low and tender. "You came." "Said I would," she whispered, smiling faintly. Judge Patterson, pressed into service since the minister was out of town, cleared his throat and began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to witness the union of Elias Boon and Clara Wade." The room was so quiet that even the judge's booming voice seemed muted. When it came time for the vows, Elias spoke first, his voice strong and unshaking. "I, Elias, take you, Clara, to be my wife. I promise to respect you, protect you, and value you for who you are, not what others say. I'll share my life with you honestly and face every storm with you by my side." Clara blinked back tears as she replied, her words clear and true. "I, Clara, take you, Elias, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you to bring light where there's darkness and to build a home with trust and understanding." They exchanged simple gold bands, and when the judge muttered, "You may kiss your bride," the entire town leaned forward to see what the mountain man would do. Elias cupped Clara's face in his rough hands and kissed her gently, soft, respectful, and full of quiet promise. The crowd went utterly still. Then, from the back, Mrs. Chen began to clap. Her daughter Amy joined her. Old Charlie, whom Clara had fed through many winters, stood and added his applause. Then more joined. People Clara had once helped, people who'd once ignored her. By the time Clara and Elias walked down the aisle, the church was ringing with the sound of clapping hands. Outside, sunlight spilled over them like a blessing. Elias helped Clara into the wagon, her modest trunk tied behind. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "I've been ready my whole life," she said. The wagon rolled away through the watching crowd. Some smiled, some whispered, some hung their heads in shame. But Clara didn't look back. She was done being the town's joke. The road wound upward, through pine forests and narrow trails, until the valley spread wide beneath them. When they reached Elias's cabin, the sight took Clara's breath. It stood sturdy and warm among the trees, smoke curling from the chimney, a wide porch facing the sunset. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's home," Elias said simply. "Our home now." Inside, the cabin glowed with firelight, shelves lined with books, a stone hearth, furniture built by hand. A place of quiet strength, much like the man who'd built it. They shared their first meal as husband and wife in front of the fire. Venison, stew, and bread. Simple, but it felt like a feast. Afterward, Elias spoke softly. "You'll have your own space if you need it. No expectations. We'll take this slow." Clara smiled faintly. "Thank you, Elias. I think we'll learn together." Quote. That night, when they lay side by side in the darkness, neither spoke for a long time. The wind whispered through the pines, and the crackle of the fire filled the silence. Then Elias said quietly, "You're not what they said you were. You're strong, kind, beautiful." Clara turned her head toward him. "No one's ever seen me like that before." "Then they've all been blind," Elias said. "I've seen you since the first day." Her hand found his in the dark. "And I see you too," she said softly. For the first time in both their lives, they felt truly seen. Two souls, battered by life, finding peace in each other. Weeks later, when a storm came roaring down the mountain, Clara rode out alone into the snow to bring Elias home after he'd gone hunting. She found him half frozen and brought him back to life by the fire, proving to both of them what kind of woman she truly was. Months after that, when 3 outlaws rode up to their cabin looking for revenge, it was Clara who stood on the porch with a rifle, her aim steady and her heart fearless. Word of her courage spread back to Cedar Ridge, and soon the same people who'd mocked her began to tell her story differently. The ugly seamstress had become the mountain healer, the brave wife of Grizzly Boon. A year later, when Clara returned to town beside Elias for the Founders' Day Fair, the crowd went silent again. She wasn't the same woman they remembered. Confidence had replaced timidity. Her face was the same, but now it glowed with life and purpose. "Is that Clara Wade?" someone whispered. "No," said young Amy Chen proudly. "That's Mrs. Clara Boon." And when Clara smiled that day, it was as though the mountains themselves smiled with her. She was no longer the woman the town pitied. She was the woman they'd never had the courage to be.